Hi guys, so we continue our GT Sport beta coverage by looking at one of the newly announced tracks. This is the Dragontrail Seaside track, fictional track, and we're driving on board the Genesis Coupe, Hyundai Genesis Coupe 3.8 car, and we have the traction control set to 2, which you can see on the right there. So, you know, as far as fictional tracks goes, I found this one pretty fun actually. As it is a new track, of course, it will take time to get used to. You'll notice, actually, it looks very yellow. It's a very yellowy tint, and that's actually down to the windscreen. I'm not sure if it's specific to the Hyundai, but you'll notice in just a moment when I change view, you'll see it's very much whiter look, more sort of realistic look, but it is just the windscreen that's giving it that sort of cartoony vibe. One thing I did notice, actually, was in the distance where the hills are, the trees, there is a bit of tree popping now and again, which again, you know, we found in the first track, so it is perhaps a signal of a larger problem with GT Sport. I hope the finished version doesn't have these sort of pop-in elements, because you know it is pretty jarring. You can see there on the grandstands just a second ago, you see the texture pop in as well. So you know, hopefully this is something they can actually eliminate. But you know, this car, I didn't get on with this car, to be honest. It really sort of struggled. I struggled to put it where I wanted to put it, basically. You know, this car it's one of the 300 brake horsepower cars or thereabouts that belongs to the lowest category you'll find in GT Sport, and of course you have the Group 3 and Group 4 cars, which are, you know, reminiscent of the GT3 and GT4 classes respectively. You see some lovely mountains in the background, some villas and apartments on the right, looking pretty interesting. You know, really sort of nice sunny vibe to this track, and I've got to say it was quite a lot of fun, despite the car that I couldn't really get on with so much. But you can see some nice chicanes there, very easy to hit the barrier there as we go through this tunnel. Now you'll see the sun on the left there peeking through, looking pretty decent as we get onto this sort of heavy braking zone. You can see that again, the lovely mountains in the background, so looking pretty decent, apart from the pop in here and there, which does sort of let it down. But as it is a beta, I guess we can expect these sort of things to pop up here and there, so to speak. So I did actually manage to get a couple of races under my belt, which I couldn't record for you guys, sadly, because it did coincide with other videos processing at the time, and that was due to the races actually getting delayed. I totally skipped the first race, so I'm not sure what went on there, but races 2 and 3 were actually delayed by some 40 minutes, so there was problems there. You know, I tried myself to, I'd done the qualifying for both races, and then when I tried to submit my entry, it just simply wouldn't allow me to. It actually told me that I was offline, which wasn't the case. So, you know, one or two teething problems. But, you know, that's what betas are all about. It's really about stressing the servers and the code now. You know, with the US beta, they introduced, you know, the first elements to stress the servers. But with the European leg, if you like, you know, they're adding more and more numbers to really give it a good test. So hopefully they can get the data and the feedback which will allow them to, you know, develop the product further, and hopefully on the finished version, you know, we'll do largely without these sort of problems, you know, because it needs to run seamlessly. A game such as this, which has such a heavy focus on the sport element, the esports elements, and you know, a bit of a mixed bag so far. 2 races I've competed in, the first of which was I think it was Brands Hatch, and you know, because there's such a high range between the first and the last drivers, simply because not a lot of people have the beta, it was a pretty clean race, because you know, most people were in their own little brackets and very much on their own in a lot of cases. So it was a pretty clean race, so I thought that was a good experience. But then I went on to the second race, which was at the Oval, the Blue Moon Oval, and I gotta say it was pretty rough going. There was a lot of colliding with cars, you know, ghosting cars hitting the side of the barriers. So, you know, this game, for me at least, really does sort of live and die off the fear, if you like, that people will have for their safety ratings. You know, if people have a genuine fear of upsetting their safety ratings, you know, you should get clean racing. But if it's not the case, then, you know, it's going to be bumper cars for, you know, for some races at least. And I really hope that's not the case. But based off what I've seen so far, it's anyone's guess, really. You know, it's a bit of a mixed bag for what I've experienced, but again, I've only experienced 2 races so far, so I'm just not sure of how it will go. But hopefully, fingers crossed, in the final product we'll get some, you know, a good game it will become to go for some clean racing on the consoles, which, you know, is very difficult to attain currently without going into private servers and really sort of going out your way to get that clean racing. So hopefully GT Sport will enable you to do that, but at the moment I'm a little bit skeptical, put it that way. Anyway, we're on the 3rd lap now, about 30 seconds in, so only 3 laps for this particular track. And yeah, it's very satisfying. You know, it's one of those tracks that has a nice sort of flow to it. Once you sort of learn the basics of the tracks, you know, there's lots of sort of chicanes and sweeping turns. It does have that sort of satisfying feel to it. But of course, there's a lot of heavy braking zones as well, which is easy to get wrong. So it will test you out as well. So it's overall, I felt it was a good track, a good fictional addition to the Gran Turismo series. And you know, it could well be a future classic. But again, you know, only time will tell. But you know, it is. You know, I thought it was a decent track. Certainly enjoyed this more than the oval track previously, as I don't typically race oval tracks. So you know, it's just one of those disciplines that I don't have very much experience in at all. But I've got to say, you know, this was pretty decent. This Dragontrail Seaside track. And you know, it'd be interesting to see what other tracks Gran Turismo Sport has up its sleeve as well. And you know, with a GT Sport Beta, you only have, at the moment, it's only 3 races, 3 different tracks. And I currently have, well, you're given 3 cars to start with, and I unlocked a 4th car. So it's very slim pickings in terms of content. So I would normally ask, what would you guys like to see? But in truth, it's more or less what, you know, I can show you basically all I have, because there's very little there to go on. And so we're going to come across the line, so we're going to leave it there for some GT Sports Beta gameplay, looking at the Dragontrail Seaside track, and we'll have more on the title coming up very shortly. Thanks for watching.